So today we are going to see modern trends in applied ethics, exploring bioethics and human genome editing. Every branch of moral theology faces distinct challenges in modern times. Technological advancements allow humans to intervene in matters of life and death. Hence, we encounter complex moral dilemmas. Today, we explore specific issues in detail. One case that highlights this concern is the case of a genome-edited babies. On 25th November 2018, in a talk at the International Summit on Human Genome Editing in Hong Kong, China, Jian Kui He, he was a Chinese scientist, he claimed his experiment involving heritable genome editing has created the world's first genetically altered twin baby girls, Lulu and Nana. And he explained the procedure. He recruited couples in which the father was infected with HIV and the mother was not. He said he wanted to spare the babies the possibility of becoming infected with HIV later in life. And he deleted using CRISPR genome editing technology. CRISPR genome editing technology, that means clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. This is the latest genome editing technology, Cas9. And he used it and he deleted the base pairs of the CCR5 gene to give protection against HIV infection, which could have occurred from the father. From the ethical background, based on current practices, scientists and ethicists criticized this case. Now, we turn our attention to the moral issues in genome editing. Gene, what is a gene? The segment of DNA sequence that codes for a biochemical function, which is usually a protein, is a gene. And we have already heard about gene therapy. Gene therapy is a treatment that modifies the genome of specific cells to treat or prevent a genetic disease. And the genome editing refers to make precise additions, deletions, and alterations to the genome. But the possible uses of genome editing technology include the treatment and prevention of diseases, improvement of human biological condition, and the enhancement of human capacities. Now we have the power to edit our genes, and with this power comes the responsibility to discern when to say yes or no to this powerful technology. And we have to determine if, when, how, and why we should or we should not employ this technology. Concerning the moral evaluation of gene therapy and genome editing is the same. Now we analyze moral issues in therapeutic genome editing. Certain human diseases result from mutations in the genome. By acting on the unhealthy gene, it is possible to give proper treatment to genetic disorders. Such an intervention to eradicate a disease or and to eradicate a pain is not contrary to Catholic faith, and it is based on Catholic tradition. But there are certain moral issues or moral questions related to somatic genome editing and germline genome editing. Genome editing can be done in two ways: somatic genome editing and germline genome editing. Therapeutic genome editing can be in two ways: somatic genome editing and germline genome editing. First, we consider somatic genome editing. The somatic genome is the genome of the somatic cells and or asexually propagated cells. The explicit objective of strictly therapeutic intervention is the healing of various genetic or chromosomal deficiencies. And another aim is the prevention of human genetic disease transmission. Somatic genome editing, either before birth or after birth, is in principle morally licit because it can alleviate human suffering. It can facilitate the treatment of genetic disease at its root, and it can reach the point of curing the patient, or it can cure the patient completely when other treatments are only palliative treatments. Though there are certain moral issues in the genome, in somatic genome editing. There are certain conditions to be fulfilled for a morally permissible or a morally licit somatic genome editing. First condition: it must promote the personal well-being of human person. In other words, the promotion of the good of the whole person. Curing a sickness refers not only to the good and health of the body, but to person as such. It does not mention the disease itself, but the condition through which a person passes. Sickness does not exist, only sick people exist. So, to assess correctly the genome editing, we must not isolate the technical problem posed by the treatment of a specific illness from the attention paid to the person of the patient in all its aspects. Therefore, somatic genome editing should promote the good of the whole person. The second condition: it should not be disproportionate to the gravity of the disease for which a cure is sought, or the question of acceptable risk. Somatic genome editing, once proved safe and effective, it can be considered unproblematic. But at present, there are off-target effects. It means off-target effects means edits in the wrong place, and mosaicism. That means when some cells carry the edit, but others do not. CRISPR-Cas9 clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats Cas9. It leads to unexpected large deletions and complex rearrangements into edited cells. Therefore, further studies are necessary to clarify the safety and efficiency of CRISPR-Cas9 before this technology is adaptive to clinical setting. The third condition: the informed consent of the parent or the legitimate representatives is required. or is necessary. The subject must be genuinely free to submit himself or herself to a somatic genome editing, or to refuse it. Obtaining consent involves informing the subject about their rights, procedures to be undertaken, potential risk and benefit, etc. The adults may never sign up in genome editing treatment in the absence of their informed consent. The problem is that the subject of somatic genome editing can be a very young child or the unborn child. The parents or the child's legal guardian can give the consent provided that the child is a direct beneficiary of the treatment and there is a hope of something from genome editing. The fourth condition, it is necessary to recognize the difference between genome editing using adult stem cells and that using embryonic stem cells. Since you have finished the BTH course, you are familiar with adult stem cells and embryonic stem cells. And the genome editing using embryonic stem cells is morally illicit or not permissible because these are the result of illicit interventions against the life and physical integrity of a human being. These are the four conditions for a morally permissible somatic genome editing. And another type of genome editing is germline genome editing or germline gene therapy. The human germline includes gametes, zygotes, and embryos. With the advent of CRISPR-Cas9, editing human germline is possible. And we have already said about the Chinese case, and this was the case of germline genome editing. Now, following are the moral issues in germline genome editing. Germline genome editing is not morally acceptable. It is morally illicit, and following are the reasons. 1. In germline genome editing, genetic modifications will be transmitted to offspring or children. Transmission of modification to progeny. In the case of germline genome editing, every consequence, expected or unexpected consequences, will be passed on to all subsequent generations. So many moralists consider the direct transmission of modification to progeny is the crucial factor distinguishing germline genome editing from somatic genome editing. Studies on animal models have shown that germline genome editing will be transmitted to the offspring and the following generations. Such a modification will violate the freedom of future persons who had no part in decisions that determine their bodily structure and characteristics in a significant and possibly irreversible way. And the second reason, uncontrollable risk factors. The risk connected to germline genome editing are not fully controllable. There are off-target effect. That means edit in the wrong place. And mosaicism. That means when some cells carry the edit, but others do not. A change in a single gene can result in multiple effects. In the case of CCR5, and this was the gene which the Chinese scientist edited in case of Lulu and Nana. In case of CCR5, the mutation offers protection against HIV infection, but it causes serious outcome in influenza infection. Another problem with the CCR5 gene is that the people with the CCR5 mutations are twice as likely to die early than people carrying CCR5 gene. In any case, it is objectionable that gene correction introduces additional unpredictable modifications. Besides, moralists also worry about the possibility of obtaining truly informed consent from parents if the dangers of germline genome therapy or editing are unknown. And the third reason, effects on the human gene pool. That means human germline genome editing at a global scale in turn lead to acceleration of changes in the human gene pool. A gene pool means it is the total genetic diversity found within a population or a species. Although there is little chance of any significant effects on the gene pool in the foreseeable future, germline genome modification at a global scale can in turn lead acceleration of changes in the human gene pool. The domestication syndrome in terms of alteration to certain pathways includes the possibility of creating a biological monoculture. We have an obligation to respect the singularity and integrity of each human person, even on the biological and genetic level. Fourth reason, germline genome editing takes place only in the context of in vitro fertilization. Genome editing tools enables precise in genome editing, but germline genome editing takes place only in the context of in vitro fertilization. In your BTH course, you have already finished a course on assisted reproductive technology, and the IVF is morally illicit, not permissible. And you know the reasons why in vitro fertilization is morally illicit or not permissible. You might have completed a course on assisted reproductive technologies. So we leave it. And the fifth reason, germline genome editing involves the risk of new eugenics. Pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. And I think you have already studied what is pre-implantation genetic diagnosis in BTH. It allows the testing of embryos created with the IVF for a genetic defects before their implantation in uterus. The parent who uses new reproductive genetic technologies does not intend to improve the undesirable trait, but to prevent it. The prevention of undesirable trait includes the selection of embryos, eliminating those affected by genetic disease or eliminating those which are carriers of genetic diseases and the destruction of the embryo that carry the undesirable traits. Thus, germline genome editing involves the risk of a new eugenics. For these reasons, therefore, in the present state of research, it is morally illicit in all its forms. Germline genome editing is morally illicit or not permissible in all its forms. Now, genome editing technology has the possibility of improving the human biological condition. And beyond, that means beyond the traditional goals of medicine, genome editing technologies can improve the non-pathological characteristics of the human body. For example, human growth hormone therapy is effective in treating growth hormone deficiency and improving the height of healthy children. Such interventions goes beyond the limits of therapeutic in the strict sense, but it should be considered morally acceptable. There are some morally problematic aspects to it. So, some conditions are necessary for morally permissible improving or improvement of the human non-pathological characteristics of the human body or improving the human biological condition. What are the conditions? First condition. This kind of intervention must respect the personal identity of the individual. It must respect the personal identity of the individual. The biological nature of each person is untouchable in the sense that it is constitutive of the personal identity of the individual throughout the whole course of his history. Each human person in his unique singularity is constituted not only by his spirit but by his body as well. Thus, in the body and through the body, one touches the person himself in the concrete reality. So, we have to respect the dignity of human person. It amounts to safeguarding the personal identity of the human person. The second condition, this kind of intervention must not infringe on the origin of human life. That means origin of human life in natural conception. That means it should not use assisted human reproductive technologies like IVF. It must respect the natural conception, natural origin of human life. Third condition, it must avoid the tendency to create groups of different persons at the risk of causing new cases of marginalization in society. Fourth condition, it should not cause racist mentality. That was the reason of why Hitler promoted eugenics in Germany. It was racist mentality. So it should not come from racist mentality. The fifth condition, there must be a proportionate harm-benefit ratio. Harm-benefit ratio is the ratio of the cost, possible risk, side effects of the improvement intervention to its potential benefits. And the sixth condition, the disease monitoring is not morally permissible because it violates the principle of non-maleficence. Disease monitoring, that means the selling of sickness that widens the boundaries of illness and grows the market for those who sell and discover treatments. The pharmaceutical companies, they label certain conditions as diseases or disorders, and they occupy the gray area between treatment and enhancement because it helps them to sell their products and make profits. And this is monitoring. It is not morally permissible. Medical advertising, that means medical education or medical information or medical diagnosis, and other marketing instruments stimulates feelings of insufficiency or feelings of unhappiness in people, and people feel miserable, and it helps relieve their pain by offering an improvement intervention. And the pharmaceutical companies, they can sell their products and make profits. Such a practice violates the principle of non-maleficence and is therefore morally unacceptable. Despite the potential to treat various diseases and to improve non-pathological characteristics of the human body, genome editing tools have the potential for enhancement interventions. Now we consider moral issues surrounding genetic enhancement interventions. Enhancement refers to interventions to improve human capacities, performances, dispositions, and well-being beyond the traditional scope of therapeutic medicine. There are three categories of enhancement interventions. One, enhancement for strengthening psychophysical capabilities. For example, we will see it in detail. Cognitive enhancements, physical enhancement, moral enhancements, genetic enhancement of the offspring, etc. Two, eugenic enhancements. And three, transhuman enhancement. For the time being, we are going to deal with enhancement for strengthening psychophysical capabilities. Eugenic enhancement and transhuman enhancement, we will not treat these two enhancements due to lack of time. We consider or we explore in detail the specific issues in enhancement for strengthening psychophysical capabilities. The first one is cognitive enhancement. Cognitive enhancement. Cognitive enhancement is one of the most widely discussed topic today. It refers to enhancement of cognition. Cognition can be defined as the process an organism uses to organize information. It includes perception, that means acquiring information, attention, understanding, and memory, that means retaining information, and reasoning and coordination of motor outputs. That means using the information to guide the behavior, reasoning, and coordination of motor outputs. Interventions to enhance cognitive functions may be directed at any one of these faculties. We have natural enhancers. For example, meditation, yoga, a good night's sleep. This can enable us to enhance our performance. And we have pharmaceutical cognitive enhancers. For example, the healthy young people take substances like methylphenidate, and its trade name is Ritalin, and modafinil, etc. Why they take this? They want to enhance their cognitive performance despite having no pathologies and make themselves more productive. That is why healthy young people take substances like methylphenidate, modafinil, etc. Methylphenidate is mainly used in the treatment of attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder. However, a growing number of healthy young people misuse or abuse methylphenidate to enhance concentration, memory, learning, and reasoning skills. Modafinil, it is originally used to treat anxiety-related disorders or other sleep disorders. However, it has become a cognitive enhancer in healthy young people. Despite their seemingly increased use, there is still not strong evidence that methylphenidate and modafinil can provide effective cognitive enhancement. Now, with the genome editing technologies, the prospect of permanent and irreversible enhancement through genetic editing can replace other forms of empowerment, because genes are the basis of cognitive abilities. Studies show so. Perception, attention, comprehension, memory, reasoning, coordination, and control of motor outputs. Studies affirms genes are the basis of these cognitive abilities. The new genome editing technologies allow scientists to intervene on genes and promise to develop the field of cognitive enhancement. Although the goal may still seem to be far away. Scientists have already demonstrated the technologies that can safely edit genes in the brains of adult animals. Some recent studies shed light on molecular mechanisms. That means linked to a single gene or a small group of genes in humans. Some scientists, for example, Lam and colleagues, they have already identified 70 independent genomic loci associated with general cognitive ability, resulting in a total of 350 genes. More recent, more specific studies demonstrates the crucial role of MAP2K3 gene in memory and the role of COMT gene in attentional brain function. So the authors of the study, they expect cognitive enhancement through genome editing will soon be possible. So we have to analyze the moral issues related to cognitive enhancement. And following are the moral issues. One, the level of safety. The level of safety is the first point to consider, given that safety is a concern regarding all forms of enhancement. Studies show that CRISPR-Cas9 can cut the DNA precisely at the desired point, but can cause large deletions and more complex genomic rearrangements at the targeted sites. Genome editing interventions can cause unexpected and unwanted off-target effects. Being more efficient in long-term memory makes us less suitable for multitasking. This is another issue with the cognitive enhancement. Studies affirms being more efficient in long-term memory makes us less suitable for multitasking. It affects us in all aspects of our lives. Therefore, cognitive enhancement must be medically safe and economically accessible. The second issue, the principle of autonomy. The existence of social pressures to perform and succeed is strong enough to force cognitive enhancement. Legal cognitive enhancement for people in high responsibility professions, such as doctors or pilots, even if they do not wish to change their genetic makeup, is not morally acceptable. There is a possibility of legal cognitive enhancement for high responsibility professions. It cannot be morally acceptable. Autonomy-based cognitive enhancement is advocate. A person should be free to make his or her own decisions. And the third issue concerning cognitive enhancement is competitive selective context. Cognitive enhancement gives advantages to the enhanced over those who do not change their genetic makeup for competitions. Therefore, the disclosure of genome editing interventions in competitive selective context becomes morally necessary. In short, cognitive enhancement through genome editing is legitimate only where it considers the safety of the practice, the autonomy, and the privacy of the individual. However, in a competitive and selective context, there can be a moral duty of disclosure. A partial reduction of the human right to privacy is necessary to protect the equally important principle of justice. Another form of enhancement. Now we have discussed the specific issues in cognitive enhancement. Another enhancement is muscle enhancement and gene doping in sports. The stories about doping or athletes caught using performance enhancing drugs are not unusual. And there are people who consider the legalization of drugs in sport may be safer. There are many possibilities for muscle enhancement in today's world. Artificial blood. Now, scientists can transfuse artificial blood into human vessels. artificial blood or synthetic blood or smart blood. It offers enhancement possibilities. Artificial blood clots more quickly than natural human blood and increase the amount of oxygen a person's hemoglobin can carry. And today we have blood substitutes. That means oxygen carrying fluids. And it provides an alternative to the transfusion of blood. With advancements in genome editing technology, sports persons, they can enhance muscle strength. You might have heard about Josiah Sainer. He injected his left forearm with the CRISPR-Cas9 technology to grow bigger muscles. A few months later, he regretted publicly injecting himself with the CRISPR. That means in today's world, we can dramatically enhance our strength and energy. And this muscle enhancement is not without moral issues. Following are the moral issues in muscle enhancements. One, in case of muscle enhancement, the potential benefits must outweigh the risk involved. Muscle enhancement has risk to health. Genome editing includes uncertainties and risk. The risk or the benefit issues are highly relevant regarding muscle enhancement. It is necessary to avoid every trend that can even damage the human body. Second, it creates inequality among sports persons. One clear example is when sports persons who use doping compete against those who have not, then gene doping removes the on a par assumption. The third moral issue, it undermines the fairness of the competitive sports. It involves cheating because it is a form of lying. It is a way of presenting one's initial endowments as if it were natural, as if it were the result of practice, hard work, and discipline, even though it really may not be so at all. And the fourth issue, gene doping or muscle enhancement goes against the spirit of sport. The protection of the spirit of sport refers to the intrinsic wrongness of enhancement, even if all the competitors made use of it. The spirit of sport aims to ensure that sports persons can compete on a fair and equal footing. Gene doping will damage the spirit of sports, as we have come to honor. In gene doping, we honor technological innovation and not a natural talent. We are not honoring athletic achievement. There are people or there are others who argue that it is easy to remedy by either changing the rules or by establishing controls and sanctions. But the problem is that changing the laws of the competition might alter the nature of the activity in question. So, physical enhancement or muscle enhancement through genome editing aims at increasing body weight, muscle strength, athletic skills, and so on. It should be noted, such interventions include unpredictable risk to the health. Now, another issue, the prolongation of human life. The prolongation of human life. That means extending lifespan. Regarding extending the lifespan, we are not dealing with the treatments. You might have already studied ordinary and extraordinary treatments, moral evaluation of treatments. Here we are not dealing with the treatments, but we are dealing with the research and development that may increase the human lifespan. The idea of life extension comes from age decelerating interventions. Genes regulating the molecular mechanisms of aging could be altered at an early age. By decelerating or arresting aging, this could prevent or at least delay the increase in human lifespan. Some experiments provide insights into the mechanisms that limit the lifespan of organisms. Developing the means to obtain maximum lifespan is a noble endeavor because the goal of research is to allow people to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. As healthy as possible for as long as possible. So it is a noble endeavor. However, the expansion of human life inevitably raises urgent moral issues. The first one, the first moral issue, the question of unequal access. The question of unequal access. The most apparent moral problem associated with the life extension is unequal access. The extension of life is made accessible for the rich and powerful. If we consider the reality of unequal death in today's world, life extension may well add to this existing inequality. This is a moral issue to be addressed, the question of unequal access. And another moral issue, the threat of overpopulation. The threat of overpopulation. Human life extension would cause, there are others who argue that human life extension may cause overpopulation, scarcity of resources, and decrease in individual welfare. And Max Moore, and he suggests one way to prevent this harm. The way is to reduce birth. However, studies show that with the most radical life extension, population growth may be relatively slow and may not necessarily lead to overpopulation. Whatever it be, even if life extension does prove to create overcrowding and resource shortage, the right to life entitles us not to deny us the option of having our lives extended. The inalienable right to life of every human individual must be recognized and respected from the moment of conception until death. The discussion about possible implications of life extension must be taken seriously without violating the right to life. Genome editing to prolong the human lifespan is both desirable and morally acceptable, provided that we deal with the moral issues in it. Another form of enhancement is moral enhancement. In most societies, through the process we call socialization and moral education, the family or the state try to make the individual internalize the norms of the group. Furthermore, the individuals choose to improve themselves morally, through meditation, the study of religion and philosophy, or by following the example of virtuous figures. However, with the technological advancement, traditional forms of moral enhancement pave the way for biological moral enhancement. Now there are pharmacological and non-pharmacological moral enhancement. And genome editing has the potential for moral enhancement. There are others who argues that genome editing has the potential for moral enhancement in 3 domains: to be more empathetic, to be less violently aggressive, and to have a higher potential for complex ethical reflection. These are the arguments that the scholars points out. For the proponents of biological moral enhancement, there are no philosophical or moral objection to use the biomedical means of moral enhancement. They argue that moral enhancement should be sought and applied. And they argue that it should be morally permissible. And they see no qualitative difference between acting directly to change a criminal's brain, that means through surgery, vaccines, or drugs, and acting indirectly, that means through punishment, to achieve moral enhancement or similar ends. Now, what are the difference between direct and indirect moral enhancement? And the difference, it matters morally. There are moral issues related to the moral enhancement of human persons. What are the moral issues? 1. Direct moral enhancement requires personal effort to achieve the desired end, and it may compromise the autonomy and the consent of the person. Whereas indirect moral enhancement, that means moral enhancement through genome editing, pharmacological or non-pharmacological enhancement. Indirect moral enhancement brings about the desired end by themselves, and it seems to threaten personal autonomy and consent. It threatens personal autonomy and consent. 2. It is essential to consider the potential unintended consequences of moral enhancement. The moral enhancement may lower immoral behavior and increase public safety, but it is not clear if this benefits the individual in question. The moral enhancement would benefit the society, but not necessarily the individual in question. I think you might have already finished a course on social teaching in BTH course. So you are familiar with the prominence of individual on society. The third issue, it can alter personal identity by changing thought patterns. The identity is the set of characteristics that make a person who he or she is. Or identity is the characteristics possessed by a person that uniquely influences his or her cognitions, motivations, and behaviors in various situations. One can argue that moral enhancement will lead to an inauthentic person. And the fourth issue, moral enhancement produces the loss of autonomy, regardless of whether it is imposed or voluntarily chosen. It can undermine the good of autonomy. Autonomy means the capacity of a person to define his or her preferences, desires, values, and ideals. Every human person has the natural right to be recognized as a free and responsible being. For example, we agree that it is good to reduce angry and aggressive behaviors. Still, a morally wholehearted person must be able to respond, even firmly, to protect vulnerable subjects. Too much empathy can lead to extremes of self-sacrifice, or too little aggression can lead to acceptance of injustice. And the fifth moral issue. Others, they are claiming that moral enhancement aims an ability to act morally. That implies moral disagreement. It undermines our freedom by reducing our options to act immorally. What makes humanity worthwhile is not only the possibility of falling, but the freedom to choose to fall. There must be the possibility of choosing between good and evil. The traditional methods of moral enhancement, namely socialization, education, and parental supervision, they do not eliminate the possibility of choosing between good and evil. This moral flexibility must be the preferential objective of moral enhancement. Moral enhancement must make possible an individual's freedom of choice, even if that choice is to act immorally. And the sixth issue, another issue concerning biological moral enhancement is moral pluralism. We have philosophical pluralism, ethnic and cultural pluralism, and religious pluralism, etc. And ethical pluralism contains many levels of meaning. There can be different or conflicting moral views. We are unable to agree on the definition of the bonum. Bonum means good. We are unable to agree on the definition of bonum. We are not unanimous on the question, what is good to be done? People have different opinions about what a moral life would look like. It is not clear how moral enhancement will affect our views on controversial topics like abortion, the death penalty, drug use, euthanasia, etc. How can we determine what sort of change should count as moral enhancement? The risk of abuse seems to be higher compared with the other kinds of enhancement because there is no consensus on what precisely constitutes morally better behavior. And the seventh issue, moral enhancement, as far as we know it today, or in accordance with the writings of the scholars, moral enhancement focus on isolated aspects of human thoughts and behavior, such as moral motivations, dispositions, virtues, cognitive capacity, cognitive capacity to engage in moral analysis, pro-social emotions, for example, increasing harm aversion or counter moral emotions. That means emotions that interfere with the moral reasoning. In fact, we cannot isolate emotions, reasons, or motives. We must know the human mind is not made up of isolated capacities or traits. Human mind is not made up of isolated capacities or traits. Although focusing on qualities, virtue, or a more holistic approach to moral enhancement is necessary for it to be successful. Based on the weighing of the possible good uses of genome editing for moral enhancement against the possible or we must stand for a more holistic approach to moral enhancement. Insofar as moral enhancement seeks to enhance moral human beings in morally ambiguous or in morally evil ways. That means because it seeks to crush legitimate human freedom and so on, it is not morally permissible or it should be opposed. And the fifth form of human enhancement, genetic enhancement of offspring or genetic enhancement of children. Genome editing technology makes it possible to select the features we want in our children. It is claimed that the use of genome editing technologies to create the best children falls under the umbrella of procreative autonomy or procreative beneficence. The parents have the right to select offspring's characteristics. What is this? The principle of procreative beneficence. It states couples or single reproducers should select the child of the possible children they could have who is expected to have the best life or at least as good a life as others based on relevant available information. If safe, cheap, and effective genetic editing interventions are available, many parents might consider enhancing their offspring to ensure them a better life. But there are moral objections. Parents may misjudge the best features for their children's lives. The second issue, the children have the right not to be burdened with their parents' expectations. The children have the right not to be burdened with their parents' expectations. There are other arguments. Parental environmental shaping and parental genetic shaping. What is the difference between the two? Even before we had advanced genome editing technologies, Parents shaped the minds and bodies of their children through education and environmental shaping. That means parental cognition and behavior, the home and neighborhood environment, etc. It shapes the minds and bodies of the children. Parental, educational, and environmental shaping is morally permissible and it is morally required. However, these ways of raising children, depending on the socio-economic status of his or her parents, or on the parents' means and place on the social ladder, creates differences and inequalities. And the children do not participate in the choice. One can therefore ask whether it is morally more objectionable to genetically edit one's children than to try to improve them through education, environmental influences, and training. There are people who argue if we are permitted to produce certain traits by modifying our children's environments, then we are also permitted to produce them by modifying their genome. So, our analysis concentrate on whether parental, genetic, and environmental shaping is on a par. There is a strong initial symmetry in genetic and environmental shaping. The objections to parental shaping, such as uncertainty and the risk of pursuing the best, an imposition on children, the parents' conception of good. And these arguments apply in similar ways to environmental and genetic shaping. These objections do not give any reason to doubt both genetic and environmental shaping are on a par. Yet, parental genetic shaping is more objectionable than parental environmental shaping. What are the reasons? Parental environmental shaping considers the expression of children's approval or disapproval. It considers the feedback of the children of the attempted shaping. And this makes it easier for the parent to assess its impact on the child's well-being. There is a reciprocal communicative process in which the child can respond to parents. Children have a chance to be heard, makes parental environmental shaping less problematic than parental genetic shaping. In the case of parental genetic shaping, consequences on the offspring are irreversible and intentionally sought social inequalities is stronger. Parental genetic shaping is irreversible and permanent. However, there are some it seems morally unproblematic cases of enhancement, such as aiming at a stronger immune system or a longer lifespan. There are others who argues it is permissible to enhance only those capacities that represent all-purpose means. That means compatible with any life plan the future person might choose. There are others who argues like this. And the proposed candidates for the role of all-purpose means are memory, intelligence, disease resistance, ability to concentrate, and a longer lifespan. These are the proposed candidates for all-purpose means enhancement: memory, intelligence, disease resistance, ability to concentrate, and a longer lifespan. These are the highly general goals, and they argue that it can be presumed to have the consent of the future child, even though these enhancements are one-way and non-reciprocal act. These all-purpose means enhancements are one-way and non-reciprocal acts. So, regarding the genetic enhancement of offspring, parental genetic shaping is more objectionable than parental environmental shaping.